Imagine this. The wind is howling, sharp and unrelenting, like it's trying to tear the world apart. Ice strikes the side of your shelter in sheets. Branches snap in the distance like dry bones. Snow builds up faster than you can clear it, and you're sitting in a cone-shaped tent made of sticks and animal skins, quietly wondering if this might be the end. There's no heater, no thermal blanket, no app telling you when the storm will pass. Just you, your family, the fire, and a tent. Take a moment to think about that. Most of us today start shivering when the AC dips below 71 degrees Fahrenheit. But entire native tribes, the Ojibwe, the Susquehannock, the Sioux on the frozen plains, even the Inuit in the far Arctic, faced storms that froze rivers, crushed trees, and could take your breath away in seconds. So how did they not freeze to death? That's the question. And no, it wasn't luck or some myth about being naturally tougher. It was knowledge, hard-earned, passed down, and tested in real time. Generations of experience taught them how to stay warm, safe, and alive in places where most people wouldn't last the night. They didn't just make do with tents. They designed them. They optimized them. They built homes that could trap warmth, vent smoke, hold families, and survive nature's worst, all without a single wire or thermostat. Watch till the end to uncover how you'll never need electric heaters, thermal gear, or even a fireplace to stay warm again. Take the teepee, for example, used by plains tribes like the Sioux. It was tall and conical, built to withstand harsh wind and snow. Its angled shape let snow slide off easily, while the top opening released smoke and trapped heat inside. Adjustable flaps helped control airflow. When built correctly, a teepee could remain comfortably warm even during intense storms. In the Northeast, tribes like the Iroquois and Ojibwe used wigwams, round, dome-like structures covered in bark or woven mats. These shelters were low to the ground, often lined with hides, and at times packed with earth around the base for added insulation. With their smaller entrances and sealed interiors, they retained heat effectively, making them ideal for deep woodland winters. Then you had the Karmak, a brilliant design used by the Inuit. Partly underground with walls made of snow, stone, and skin, it featured a sunken floor that trapped cold air before it reached the living space. A naturally efficient system designed long before modern science gave it a name. You'll start to see the pattern. These structures weren't just places to sleep. They were finely tuned systems for conserving heat and surviving the elements. So when people say they lived in tents, remember, those tents are often better designed for winter than some modern homes. And we're only just beginning. Now that your shelter is properly insulated and sealed, it's time to light the fire. Seems straightforward, but in traditional native shelters, fire wasn't just about comfort. It was a matter of survival, and getting it wrong could have serious consequences. Inside a teepee, the fire pit was placed directly in the center, serving as both a heat source and the core of daily life. Its position allowed warmth to spread evenly, but it wasn't something you could light and forget. A fire too strong would overwhelm the space with smoke. Too weak, and you risked freezing. There was no luxury of trial and error. Precision mattered. The smoke hole at the top played a crucial role. With no chimney, the only way to ventilate was by adjusting outer flaps based on the wind. A slight miscalculation could trap smoke inside or let cold air flood in. In the worst conditions, it could mean the difference between a warm night and an unbreathable space. In the far north, the Inuit Karmak took a more refined approach. Fires were often small, slow-burning lamps fueled by seal oil. They produced minimal smoke and just enough heat, but still required careful ventilation. Even a clean burn could pose a risk if airflow wasn't managed correctly. And no, they weren't making s'mores. They were managing fire in a way that balanced warmth, air quality, and life itself. This was ventilation as a survival skill. No fans, no thermostats, just knowledge, instinct, and constant attention to detail. The fire had to be watched, adjusted, and respected. So next time you sit beside a fire for fun, remember, your ancestors did it under pressure, with fewer tools and much higher stakes. All right, the fire's going and the ventilation is working exactly as it should. Now comes the next critical step. How do you keep all that precious heat from escaping? The answer? Layering. And not just in clothing, layered insulation was key to surviving sub-zero conditions. Native tribes didn't rely on manufactured insulation. They had the environment, and they understood exactly how to use it. It often started with birch bark, a natural material that was water-resistant, flexible, and effective at retaining heat. On top of that came layers of grasses, cedar shavings, or woven mats. The result was a kind of thermal sandwich, built entirely from the land, designed to hold warmth where it mattered most. Then came animal hides. Thick skins from bison, moose, or caribou weren't just clothing, they were insulation for homes. Draped over the outer walls of shelters, they created a barrier that resisted even the harshest winds. With the right layering, the temperature inside a shelter could remain tolerable, even during heavy storms. And up north, snow wasn't seen as a threat. It was used as a tool. Snow is full of air pockets, and air is an excellent insulator. By packing snow against exterior walls, people created a natural shield that held heat in and cold out. It wasn't risky, it was resourceful. In the Great Lakes area, tribes like the Susquehannock built partially underground longhouses, using the earth itself to preserve warmth and block wind. Combined with a low roof and strategic layout, these structures stayed significantly warmer through the coldest months. And for the Inuit, the Carmack's entrance tunnel acted like a cold air buffer, angled and sunken to keep freezing drafts from entering the main space. This wasn't guesswork. It was tested, refined, and passed down. They didn't just endure winter, they understood it and built homes that worked with nature, not against it. Now that the shelter's fully insulated, there's still one critical factor left: clothing. Because unless you plan to sleep inside the fire pit, what you wore can mean the difference between a warm night and frostbite. Native tribes understood this better than anyone. Their approach to winter clothing was nothing short of genius, practical, layered, and purpose-built for the environment. Take the caribou parka, a cold weather essential among the Inuit. It wasn't just one layer, it was often two. One outer layer with the fur facing outward to repel wind and snow, and one inner layer with the fur facing inward to trap body heat. It worked with the body's natural warmth, maximizing retention without overheating. Simple, effective, and designed for survival, not style. Then there was the amauti, worn by Inuit mothers. It featured a generously sized hood that held infants snugly against the mother's back, inside the warmth of the coat itself. No stroller, no mittens, just carefully planned body heat transfer, ensuring even the smallest family members stay protected. And when it came to sleep, the strategy was equally well thought out. Furs were laid on the ground, layered on top, and, most importantly, shared. People slept closely together, often in a circle, conserving warmth communally. Children were typically placed in the center where it was warmest and safest. These weren't improvised decisions. They were based on knowledge passed through generations, tested by experience and refined by necessity. Before the concept of thermal wear existed, they had already mastered it. So while today's clothing might carry high-tech promises, indigenous communities achieved real insulation using natural materials, careful layering, and human connection. They didn't need product tags to know they were warm. They simply knew what worked. Now imagine it's the middle of the night. You're wrapped in furs, surrounded by shared body heat, but the fire has burned down and the cold is creeping in. You need warmth, and fast. There's no technology to rely on, no heated blanket to switch on. What you reach for instead is a stone. That's right, heated stones. No decoration, no special shape, just ordinary rocks transformed into effective tools for survival. Throughout the day, tribes would heat them near the fire, then carefully wrap them in skins or moss and place them beneath sleeping areas. These stones held heat well into the night, acting like a natural, reusable heat source. Among the Inuit, the method evolved with precision. Flat stones were warmed over kuliks, soapstone lamps fueled with seal oil, and placed strategically in sleeping spaces. The heat radiated gently, offering comfort through long, frozen nights. It wasn't flashy, but it worked. Quiet, consistent, and reliable. In some communities, stones were buried in small pits beneath raised platforms, allowing warmth to rise from below. Instead of sleeping on the cold earth, they slept on ground that radiated residual heat, like a natural heating system powered by fire and foresight. What made this method so effective wasn't just its simplicity, it was the efficiency. These stones stored heat for hours, required no maintenance, and could be reheated as needed. In harsh conditions, they weren't optional, they were essential. So far we've looked at shelters, heating strategies, and body warmth, but there's one survival factor that often gets overlooked: food. Not just as nutrition, but as a source of heat. Because in freezing conditions, your ability to stay warm depends on more than just your clothes or fire. It depends on what's fueling your body. Your body acts like a furnace, and food, especially high-calorie, high-fat food, is the fuel that keeps it burning. Indigenous communities understood this well. During winter, their diets were built around dense, energy-rich staples like seal oil, whale blubber, reindeer fat, smoked fish, and dried meats. These foods didn't just fill the stomach. They provided long-lasting, slow-burning energy that kept the core temperature stable through long, cold nights. In these conditions, fat wasn't the enemy. It was essential. One bowl of hot stew with a layer of fat on top wasn't considered heavy. It was seen as smart. The body needed it to keep producing internal heat. In storms and freezing nights, that extra layer of energy often meant the difference between enduring and collapsing. Then there's the kulik, a soapstone oil lamp common in Inuit homes. Fueled by seal blubber, it served many roles: cooking meals, melting snow, lighting the shelter, and gently heating the space. It was compact, reliable, and burned steadily for hours without smoke, practical and effective, long before modern heating systems existed. They didn't rely on processed bars or synthetic fuel packs. They relied on generations of understanding what actually worked in the harshest environments. So the next time you're cold and reaching for a light snack, remember, your ancestors would have gone straight for the fat, and they knew exactly why. At this point, you're well-fed, wrapped in furs, and sleeping with heat stored beneath you. But even with all of that, you weren't expected to face an ice storm alone. True survival wasn't just about individual skill. It was about community. Native families didn't separate into isolated shelters. They lived together, sometimes a dozen or more people in one wigwam, longhouse, or lodge. Not because they lacked space, but because more bodies meant more heat. It was a practical application of body warmth. Elders, children, extended relatives, each person added to the collective warmth of the space. In moments like these, family wasn't just emotional support. It was insulation. Inside the large longhouses used by Iroquois and other eastern tribes, there weren't just single fires. There were multiple hearths, each serving a portion of the household. One fire might support several families. 3 fires, placed evenly, could keep the entire structure warm. These homes weren't crude. They were intentionally designed for communal living in cold weather. But it wasn't only about staying close. Work was shared too. Wood needed gathering, fires required tending, and shifts were rotated so others could sleep. Everyone played a role. And yes, if someone consistently avoided their duties, it was noticed. Cold nights had a way of making consequences clear. This was survival through coordination, not isolation. It was a shared responsibility, where everyone's contribution kept everyone alive. So while modern culture often celebrates going it alone, indigenous communities thrive by working together. In a blizzard, your greatest asset wasn't just what you knew or what you wore. It was who was around you. Sometimes your warmest blanket was another human being, whether or not they snored. By now, you're likely thinking, these communities were incredibly skilled at handling winter. And you'd be right. But here's what makes it even more impressive. Not all native tribes faced winter the same way, because not all winters were alike. They didn't simply wait for storms to pass. They adapted to their landscapes with remarkable precision. Plains tribes, for example, endured open, wind-heavy winters that were as harsh as they were unpredictable. To avoid the worst of it, many migrated seasonally, moving south or into sheltered terrain before the cold reached its peak. It wasn't aimless wandering. It was a carefully timed response to the climate. Mobility as a survival strategy. In the Northeast, tribes such as the Abenaki and Mohican would often move deeper into forested regions. Trees provided natural barriers against wind, access to firewood, and better insulation from exposure. Snow was still a challenge, but at least the landscape offered protection. Further north, the Inuit faced winters that tested every resource. They responded by developing highly specialized shelters like the Karmak and Igloo, built from snow and ice yet able to retain warmth efficiently. Across the Atlantic, Sami reindeer herders in Arctic Scandinavia used turf huts and reindeer skins layered with equal care, showing how indigenous ingenuity existed wherever nature made demands. Meanwhile, eastern woodland tribes designed expansive longhouses capable of housing multiple families and several hearths, effectively turning a communal home into a warm, self-sustaining unit. The common thread? Every group designed systems that worked for their unique climate. There was no one-size-fits-all. What made sense in Alaska wouldn't suit the Southeast. It wasn't about imitation. It was about deep awareness of place. In the end, survival came down to knowing your land and adapting to it with precision and care. So here we are, 10 segments in. And if one message stands out, it's this. Native tribes didn't just endure winter, they mastered it. Their knowledge of cold weather survival wasn't written down or taught in structured lessons. It was passed along through stories, lived experience, and observation. There were no forecasts or data models, there were elders. And when one of them advised against building a shelter facing the wind, you listened. The consequences of ignoring experience were immediate and unforgiving. This wasn't guesswork. It was generational knowledge earned over time. People figured out how to position a fire for maximum heat, how to store warmth in stone, when to relocate before storms arrived, and what to eat to sustain energy and body heat. Some learned through hardship, others watched, adjusted, and taught. What emerged was a deeply refined system, rooted in necessity and insight. Let's step back and recap. These communities built shelters that ventilated properly but sealed in heat. They used materials like bark, grass, snow, and hides to create insulation better than what's found in many modern homes. They prepared food not just to survive, but to maintain warmth from the inside out. They shared space, shared effort, and moved with the seasons rather than against them. And they did all of it without modern materials, electric heaters, or digital shortcuts. The secret wasn't magic. It was understanding. Understanding the environment, using what the land provided, and working together with skill and intent. They didn't discover survival, they lived it, and they refined it into something efficient, sustainable, and incredibly effective. So the next time you reach for the thermostat in frustration, remember, these communities crafted warmth from knowledge, and they succeeded where many today wouldn't last a single night. If this made you rethink what it actually takes to survive the cold, or just gave you a new level of respect for the people who did it first and did it best, go ahead and hit that like button. And if you learned something new today, drop a comment below and let us know. Which part surprised you the most? Or maybe you've got your own cold survival trick. We'd love to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe because we've got more stories like this. Real lessons from real people who outsmarted nature with nothing but knowledge, grit, and a little creativity. Thanks for watching, and stay warm.